Welcome back to the House of Hoosier podcast, presented by the Field of 68 Podcast Network. I'm Ian Plaskoff, joined by Austin Platt and Kevin Vera from Inside the Hall today. It's been a little while. It's been a busy schedule here in Bloomington for us. Midterm season, baseball, softball starting up, and of course, basketball season in full swing as well as we head into March. So it's been a little bit of a delay. We haven't been able to cover some of the stuff in the past couple of weeks, but we'll get to that today for sure. Austin, Kevin, thanks for joining today. And I'm happy to be back. I had to miss the last episode. It was just a hectic schedule for me. I was getting ready for the women's Big Ten tournament, and yeah, it's good to be back.
Good to have you back. And Kevin was that one guy that kept pestering me about being on this show. It was like, Kevin, you remember when Logan Duncombe, like his mom went out on Twitter and was like, Mike Woodson, my son should play more. Like, and the next game he played, came off the bench against Michigan State a few years ago. That's like you, man. You are Logan Duncombe of the House of Hoosier podcast.
I had to make it with you guys on. You guys doing such a great job this year. Like I had to find my way onto the podcast somehow.
Hey, thank you, Kevin. It all kind of worked out. We were just sitting at a table earlier today and figuring out when to record this, and Kevin was right there. He's like, "Hey, let's do it tonight," and here we are. So, Kevin, thanks again from inside the hall. You've probably seen his coverage all year long, and yeah, lots to talk about. We're going to go back a little bit. We haven't been able to talk about the bubble battle against Ohio State. And I was there. I was a fan. I was in the first row of the balcony, which are spectacular seats, I will say. Um,
Underrated part of Assembly Hall.
Very underrated. First row
Yes.
of the balcony, I would
First
highly
row of the
recommend.
balcony.
Just a gutsy win. I mean, Indiana won this game shooting 35% from the field. Trey Galloway, of course, shades of Game 3, Andrew Nemhard in the Eastern semis last year. And yeah, that was quite the great atmosphere with the whiteout and a much needed win for Indiana.
Yeah, I mean it was a really good win for the Hoosiers, and it's funny because like we like us at Inside the Hall, we were kind of talking about like just the differences in between atmosphere and the energy on the floor and just all the emotions that were driven towards this game is you look back at Illinois and everybody thought it was over, right? I mean, Illinois was an ugly night. Illinois was a night that, a lot of people kind of shut the door a little too soon on this Indiana squad. And, they're able to go out there and get a great win against Ohio State that they needed to, punch themselves into the NCAA tournament. But, I think the thing that stuck out to me about this game is, again, kind of what I said. It's just how emotionally driven it was. I mean, you could sense how bad Woody wanted it. Woody was obviously very emotional during the game, after the game. And yeah, it was fitting that Trey stepped up big. It was fitting that Anthony was doing Anthony Leal things, and it was a very good win for the program considering the rock bottom. I don't want to say rock bottom, but the low point that they had at certain times throughout the season.
No, you see these post-game interviews where the team like mobs Mike Woodson, gives him hugs. You saw the locker room video as well with Trey Galloway and his 1,000 points. Like you can tell that this team is rallying around their head coach. They have nothing to lose and everything to win. They're playing that way, and especially the seniors, Leo Galloway and Goody. It's just a pleasant sight to see, and it's something that we were missing earlier in the season.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point that you bring up. And say what you want about Woody, right? I mean, Woody's obviously going to step down at the end of the year. You've had some very good moments, some very bad moments under Mike Woodson. And at the end of the day, it didn't work out. But again, say what you want about him, but he never lost the locker room. In his 4 years here, everybody on that staff, all those players, they all adore Woodson and they all, you know, are very prideful of playing under Mike Woodson. And Woodson's that type of guy, that type of coach that, he's doing it for the players. And so you kind of saw all of those emotions, everything that I just said kind of bottled up in that game. And I think the most fitting part of that, of what I'm trying to explain, is after the post-game presser with the players. I think Trey was the final question, and Trey gave his answer, whatever. And then as the presser was about to end, everybody stood up and everybody was about to end. But then Anthony said, "Hey, I have one more final thing to say." And he said something along the lines of, "This is Woody's last game of Assembly Hall. Like, this was a great way to send him off. And obviously, Whitson cares a lot about this program. So it was very special to see the connection that they had. And obviously, it somewhat intensified as the season got on going, right? Because, you go from having, bad losses to ultimately, making it work at the end of the day and making the tournament.
Woodson is a player's coach. I mean, it's been that case for the past 4 years. As much as some of the fans may not have liked him, he knows how to relate to these guys, and you
Absolutely.
see all of these players, previous players that he's coached, come back and say great things about Mike Woodson. Now, is he the greatest X's and O's coach in the world? No, but you can't disrespect him for building the program the way that he builds programs. It may not win a national championship,
Yeah.
but Indiana's going to be in the tournament 3 out of the 4 years that he's been here. And I mean, Archie Miller was, I mean, people don't really hate on Archie Miller, it seems, as much as Mike Woodson, which is weird. I don't know if Rhode Island won their game today. I was watching the first part of it, and they were down 10 to Fordham. I don't know what the result of that was. Um, but no, Mike Woodson's going to be making the tournament for 3 times in his 4 years as head coach here at Indiana, and he's sent some players to the NBA. He's had some great successes, beaten Purdue 4 times. We hung that banner a few episodes ago. And I mean, he's accomplished some great things at Indiana. He's not the answer that Indiana was hoping for to get back to the standard of what Bob Knight was, but let's be honest, it's going to be extremely difficult to find someone who's going to get Indiana to that standard again. And that's the tough part about this coaching search. But Mike Woodson has won timely games, especially late in the season. He's never lost the locker room, like you said, Kevin. And these players have played for him no matter what. It's just a matter of the X's and O's that just haven't always been there.
Yeah, I think with Woody, again, like you mentioned, again, Woodson's making the tournament 3 out of 4 years. And, I think when we look back at it, it's going to be fair to say that Woodson left the program better than he found it, right? Indiana was not doing well after Archie, they had some good years on the cream, but again, it wasn't working. But Woodson, again, like you said it best. It's like Woody isn't going to go out and, necessarily win you a title in his second season as a head coach. But, he's going to do good things, right? You look at those Purdue games and the level of talent disparity that you see, especially in the first season, right? With the Rob shot. Like, Purdue has had much better teams, much more talented teams in Indiana the last 4 years. And they've still been able to make it work, right? I mean, if when you ask me a year from now, after I graduate, Ian, what my favorite game was to cover as an Indiana student, I have several that come to mind, but honestly, the one that might take the cake was when Jalen Hood-Schifino just walked into Mackey Arena, the loudest arena I've ever been in, and drops 30, 31 points as a freshman. You know what I mean? And so there were some good moments against Woody or with Woody, but I think the best way to kind of summarize everything is like the game has kind of evolved a little too fast for Woody, right? And we've seen that this year. You kind of, you know, saw it with the portal a little bit. He was successful in the portal, right? He was able to get very good pieces, but as we've seen this year with Indiana and a few other teams across college basketball, talent doesn't necessarily equal to results. And so it's stuff like that. It's like playing two bigs in the middle of the game. I mean, eventually Woodson was sticking or is now playing just Ballo or Malik, and we'll see both of them sometimes on the floor, but not nearly as much as we saw in the first half of the season. But again, like you said, Woody, did some good things against Indiana, but at the end of the day, there's kind of a cap to Woodson, and we've seen that in this fourth year.
The end part of this season kind of feels like Indiana's doing everything it can to send him out on the right foot. And this Ohio State game felt like a big step in that direction. I mean, one of Mike Woodson's best games of his career, and I think his last game at Assembly Hall was against Ohio State as a player. And then in this game, it just felt like a storybook kind of ending to Mike Woodson's tenure coaching in Assembly Hall, playing in Assembly Hall, just being in Assembly Hall. Because you don't really see him anywhere else. Like he's not a very public figure. Like you correlate Mike Woods into Assembly Hall, and it was the perfect way to send him out on the right foot with, especially on senior night, where so many of these Indiana guys are graduating the program, and of course Galloway, Leal, and Goody coming up huge. It just felt like a storybook ending. We'll get into the X's and O's of this game, but really, if anything, it just felt like the right way to send him out of Assembly Hall.
Yeah, and I think again to go back to the whole player thing, the players really wanted this one for Woody. And we got to remember, I mean, I think we saw it this year. Again, I'm not saying Woodson is the answer and he's going to be, or he should be given another shot. That's not at all what I'm saying. But people were quick to judge a little bit, right? And you can't forget who Woodson was as a player here, right? Woodson's one of the best players ever in Indiana University in the history of the program. And Woodson loves this place, right? He loves it as much as we do. He loves it as much as every single alumni, whether they played basketball or not. And, I can't imagine some difficult nights, right, for Woodson and Woodson's family that he had, during those low points of the season, right? I mean, to go back to that Illinois game, I've only covered this team for 4 years, but and I think Zach Osterman from the Indy Star either tweeted about it or said something um, about it after the game in their podcast. But he was saying that he has never seen Indiana have that sort of reaction in Assembly Hall. So, again, it's like Woodson loves this place, right? And there's been there was a lot. He was attacked in the middle of the season, right? But again, like you said, it was a perfect way to go out, and the players really wanted this one for him.
Let's get it. I mean, into the X's and O's of this game. It was the Indiana guys that really made the strongest impact, either from the state or have been in the program. Trey Galloway, of course, hit the biggest shot of the game, 16 points, 6 of 15 from the field, 3 of 7 from three, 6 assists and 2 rebounds. Malik Renew also 16 and 5 rebounds in 22 minutes, a plus 13 for him. Mackenzie Mbaka was also a plus 13, only 7 points, didn't play too much or make too much of an impact in his 31 minutes. Then, of course, Anthony Leal. I mean, first of all, Anthony Leal was
I
snubbed
know where you're
from
going with this.
the
As
all
soon as you
defense
said
team in the
first of
Big Ten.
all.
Why was Ace Baldwin the defensive player of the year? That makes absolutely no sense. You can't miss your conference tournament and get defensive player of the year. Let's just quick pause. I just had to get that out there.
Yeah, you're speaking for a lot of people here.
Leal was great. He was another positive guy in the plus minus. He played 35 minutes. A classic Leal stat line: 4 points, 2 shots, 8 rebounds and assists, 2 blocks and a steal. And then Goody, 11 points. Did not shoot the ball very well, but the free throw line he was huge. 8 of 10 from the charity stripe, 8 rebounds as well. It wasn't too big of a game for Umar Ballo. It didn't really mean too much. He didn't have to do too much. Ohio State was a team that doesn't really play to Umar Ballo's style, and then Kanan Carlisle was Kanan Carlisle. That's about all that needs to be said there. Um, yeah, I mean, this was not a pretty game by any means, but Indiana did just enough to stick around the whole way and then attack at the right time.
Yeah, I think again, it was just a culmination of a lot of things that kind of represent Indiana this season for Indiana. But the biggest piece and the X factor in this game was Trey, right? Trey really played extremely well. He was very poised at the moment, right? And you got to give Trey credit considering the season he's had, right? He didn't get off to the best start. He was shooting lower from three in terms of percentage than last year at the start of the year. He was eventually taken out of the starting lineup and flip-flopped a little bit. And, you know, the expectation for Trey coming into this season, right, was for him to sort of be kind of a quick sub guy, a guy that can come in and out of the game, give the starting point guard, in this case, Miles Rice, some minutes. And then, Rice kind of fully took over that starting job. And then Trey kind of wasn't playing as good as he was. And then, you know, it kind of switched around. And now you see it kind of come back full circle and just how Trey being such an important piece to this team. I mean, it's the ball handling that skills that he has can't be be forgotten in a game like this. Just the leadership in the moments too. When you think back of the Purdue game at Mackey this season, who are some of the most poised players on the floor, right? It was Trey, it was Anthony, it was Mackenzie. Mackenzie had a good game that game. But, Trey was the X factor in this game. And obviously that shot, Trey, I think that'll be the moment that Trey Galloway thinks back and remembers from his Indiana career, right? Was that three-pointer that he hit on senior day against Ohio State.
Yeah, that shot was special. I can't think of many Trey Galloway shots or performances that would outdo that. If Indiana won the game against Kansas last year, maybe that game as a whole, because that was great from Trey. But no, that shot is going to hold a special place in the space of Trey Galloway, just because the stakes of that game. If Indiana lost that game, we'll get into more of the Big Ten tournament coming up, but. If Indiana lost that game, they would have had to win two this weekend, probably to sneak in the field at least. But they're sitting pretty right now with that win in the bubble battle. Also, just noting, Austin Platt is a little bit quiet up there because he just called a Indiana softball go-ahead grand
He's
slam
been
earlier this
calling. He's
afternoon.
been
The voice
calling.
is a little bit shaky, so just letting everybody know that. It was a heck of a game for Indiana softball, and it really Indiana sports are firing on all cylinders right now. But that's just the update on Austin Platt.
I'm alive. I'll say one thing quickly. I watched like the 5 minute highlight of this game. God, I sound terrible. But this game reminded me of the senior day 2 years ago when I beat Michigan. You're down for essentially the entire second half. Ugly game. You're not playing at your best, and you're playing for a seed, right? I mean, Indiana knew if they won that game, they would have had the double bye in the Big Ten tournament. In this game, they knew they would be playing on Thursday, the day this. You guys are all listening to this before IU plays Oregon, so kind of reminded me of that. I mean, there's the games this year that Indiana at home have been down for a while. Penn State is right up there as well. The game before this at Assembly Hall, you come back and you win. So I mean, it's the upperclassmen and the experience has really mattered as of late. And yeah, I mean right now, I mean, you could be, the season like could be over. Like you could have lost that 10-15 game as the 10 seed and you'd be packing your bags and headed back down to Bloomington and your season's over. But now you're safely in and, good for Woodson getting 3 tournaments in 4 years. And it's kind of weird how much we've shifted the expectations since the beginning of the year. But I mean, hey, here we are. You got to be in it to win it. So it's just good to get some national attention, at least get something as you open the door for Woodson to presumably walk out unless he says I don't know if I'm leaving too early, but buddy, just it is all set up for you to just walk out peacefully. Please just do that.
Yeah, we'll move on to the Big Ten tournament. I think this is it's a little bit overhyped in what people are saying about the stakes of this tournament for Indiana. I mean, the Hoosiers are safely in to March Madness, I would think. The only thing is one, to keep some momentum going in this tournament, and two, to make sure you get out of Dayton. I mean, Dayton's a lovely city. We can talk all about Dayton, but Indiana does not want to play in Dayton. And this tournament, you beat Oregon, you're probably not playing in Dayton.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, I was talking to some people today, and it's like they need a they need that win. They need a win tomorrow, right? They need to win tomorrow against Oregon if they want to avoid Dayton. I've heard some people even say if they go on and you might even have to win two, but I don't agree with that necessarily. I think if you beat Oregon, you're safely out of Dayton. If you lose, you're kind of a lock. Can you agree? Like if they lose tomorrow against Oregon, they're kind of locked to go in that first four. And like you mentioned, they don't necessarily want to be there, right? You want to go on and, move past this first four round, right? They played there in 21, 22. But, again, it should be a very interesting game, a game that Indiana is favored in, but I think Indiana will win in the long run, but honestly, it wouldn't be surprising to me if Oregon comes out and sort of replicates the success they had against IU just a couple weeks ago.
I mean, you look back to that game in Eugene, and Indiana was there the whole time. They were playing well. The free throws and a Jackson Shellstad 30 plus foot shot with under a minute to go was the difference in that game. I mean, Mike Woodson made his thoughts very clear about the free throw disparity and words that we cannot say on this podcast. But Jackson Shelstad, I mean, I knew he was going to hit that shot. It was only fitting that he was going to hit it.
Right.
But Indiana's right there. They're going to have a home crowd in Indianapolis today as you're listening to this. Um, I really feel confident that Indiana could put up a good fight and ultimately come out victorious. But this is the Big Ten tournament. We know how Indiana plays in the Big Ten tournament. Now, Mike Woodson has done a better job than most Indiana coaches in this Big Ten tournament, but still, it just feels like whenever Indiana plays on a neutral site court, it does not go well.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the truth, right? You've seen Indiana the past couple of years, right? The biggest game that comes to my mind is obviously the Iowa game, in the Big Ten tournament a couple of years ago. But yeah, I mean, look, I think Indiana, like you said, had success against Oregon for large parts of that game out in Eugene. And you know, you can say what you want about the officiating, but I think at the end, and we've seen this in some games, it's just the late game miscues from Indiana. And, you know, in Ohio State, they didn't have that, right? They were able to be better than they needed to be in the final moments against the Buckeyes. But, you know, against Oregon, we kind of saw them just kind of, you know, just crumble a little bit. And we saw that obviously against Maryland, against UCLA, and you know, the play that does it for me, I wrote about it in my story for Oregon. I wrote about that game out in Eugene. And it was around the minute 22 mark, around the minute 21 mark. It was after the Sheldon shot, and you know, it was just Trey was at the top of the key. He was getting a screen from Ballo on the left side, and you know, Ballo was trying to create space, and Trey was kind of going from left to right in a sporadic motion, and then he tried to go left lane, if I'm remembering correctly, and he just got tripped up by a pair of defenders, and then that was it, and Oregon got the ball back. So it's those type of plays in late game moments that we've seen Indiana not be great at this season, and they're going to need to avoid that against Oregon, and they're going to need to avoid that if they continue to move on in the Big Ten tournament and even in March Madness.
It feels like three-point shooting has been the difference for Indiana as this turnaround has gone on. We've seen guys shoot the ball better. Galloway, one of those, Goody, one of those guys as well. Indiana outshot Oregon 9-6 in the last matchup. They outshot Oregon from the field. It was pretty close all the way through. And then Oregon made 19 free throws to Indiana's three. These teams are pretty evenly matched up. It feels like their styles may not be as similar, but it feels like they've got the same kind of talent on their teams, that it's going to be close either way. What do you see as the difference maker that could ultimately set one team victorious over the other?
I think it's just being efficient, right? I mean, Indiana as of late has been a much more efficient team, you know, capitalizing on their possessions. Guard play has been very good as of late, right? You could circle it back to Galloway, who we've talked about a lot already in this episode, and but then also, I mean, Luke Goody has shot the ball well when he's needed to. Anthony Leal, right? You know, Leal has been such. Imagine where this team wouldn't be with would be without Anthony Leal. And although Anthony is gonna give you max 4 points a night, right? There's just so many other things that have been that he does well. And Indiana, as of late, I also want to mention, has been rebounding the ball a lot better too. They've been a lot more aggressive. You can just tell when they're jumping on the ball when it comes off the rim. Um, but you know, to answer your question correctly, you know, what do I think they need to do to win this game, or what will be the difference maker? I think is, yeah, Indiana being efficient, being poised in those late game moments, being under control, realizing that they're playing good basketball right now. They've been playing good basketball the past couple weeks, and in the games that they've lost, like the one against Oregon, you know, it's been close. So they just need to kind of continue to ride this wave. It was bumpy towards the beginning, but now it's smoothing out. So you kind of just gotta cruise alongside it and see where it takes you.
Yeah, the game in Eugene, it was a 9 point victory for Oregon, but it wasn't a 9 point victory at heart. Like Oregon went on a 10-0 run in the final 90 seconds. Indiana finished 2 of 12 from the field in this game. If you look back, this game, you look at the UCLA game, you look at the Maryland game. Granted, Indiana is going to be in the tournament, so those losses don't really matter as much as they would. if Indiana was still on the bubble, but it's been late game execution this year. That has been one of the biggest problems. It lost the game against Maryland. It lost the game against Purdue at Mackey. It lost the game against UCLA, and it lost this game against Oregon. If you're able to pick up two of those wins, even, you'd be in a much better spot than what you are right now. You might even pick yourself up to an 8 seed in the tournament. But especially when you're going in tournament mode, you're going one and done the rest of the way through. Um, it's got to be you got to execute in late games. You got to make timely shots, and you can't allow these quick 10-0 runs, or you can't allow yourself to go 2 for 12 from the field in the final whatever, however long it may be. It's been a consistent problem for Indiana, not only this year, but in previous years. So that's my biggest key. You can't, you got to execute in late games. You got to prevent these runs because it's costed Indiana quite a few games this year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That's been the biggest things that Indiana hasn't necessarily done right. And, again, if you can continue to get this ball rolling with, again, the 3-point shooting, getting good production from Malik, again, you know, I think Malik hasn't been talked about enough lately since kind of bouncing back a little bit from his injury. But even with his injury, Malik has been putting up some very good numbers. He's looked a lot more mature on the floor, a lot more comfortable just with the spacing he's been able to create. He kind of knows now there's a little bit of boost of confidence in Malik's play as of late, right? And credit to him dealing with that this he's dealing with an injury this season. But again, it's if Indiana can get a very good day from Galloway, if they can get that 3-point shooting from Goody, if they can get that paint presence from Malik, that scoring from Malik in the paint, and the physicality from Ballo, right? And you're able to play under control. Indiana's, a good team, right? Indiana can surprise them folks, especially how they've been playing as of late. So, it's easier said than done, but if Indiana can do a lot of all of those things, they'll be good in the Big Ten tournament and potentially in March.
You talk about a surprise, and you look at the rest of this bracket and the path that Indiana has to the championship. If Indiana beats Oregon, it's a date with Michigan State. Now, Tom Izzo does typically like to take the Big Ten tournament off a little bit. I mean, the Spartans are going to be a 2 seed no matter what. Even if they win this tournament, they're probably still going to be a 2 seed. So I don't know what's going to happen if Tom Izzo's going to, take a step back in this tournament, let his guys get healthy, rest up a little bit. Then after that, I believe it would be Maryland or Michigan, and then it would be the tournament or the championship after that. Do you see an actual path for Indiana to make a deep run in this tournament? Not like it's going to matter too much, because really it's just a matter of Dayton or not. Um, but do you see any way Indiana could make a little bit of a run?
I do. I do. Again, I think, the game against Oregon will be tight. There'll be some contested moments between the two. But again, I see them winning that game. They're gonna give Michigan State a fight, right? I mean, the most important win of the season for Indiana was the win in East Lansing, you could argue, right? That saved their season. That saved them from being completely out of the tournament conversation. And they played that game extremely well on the road in a tough environment. The only thing that worries me for Indiana moving forward with this tournament is, of course, like you mentioned, Michigan State's going to be a 2 seed this year. They've been very good. They've been one of the fastest team on the Big Ten. They just run the floor so well. But they're playing some really good basketball right now to close out the year. They're playing very well, and they're coming into this one sort of energized after whatever that was that took place against Michigan. But it's Indiana, I think, will pair up well against Michigan State. I think that game will also be very close. Again, the home crowd will have a big factor in that as well. But if Indiana beats Michigan State, right? I mean, you're talking about you would go up, pulling up the bracket right now, UCLA perhaps, and then the winner. I mean, you're gonna play UCLA, maybe Maryland. Like, there's a chance for Indiana to make a slight push. Do I think to win it? No, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Indiana in the semis.
Austin knows this. I've been the optimistic guy all year long. I mean, you look at the bracket, I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but if you're talking UCLA and Maryland, those are two teams that Indiana could have beat if they executed one play at the end. Now, I get this is not the SEC. We don't talk about ifs, whats, and could haves, but it's not to say there isn't a chance. Like the Indiana has put up, other than Iowa and Illinois, which are teams that have really fallen off a cliff as of late, and Nebraska as well. Indiana has not been blown out and they've been competitive with most, if not all of the other teams in the Big Ten that they have played. Like Indiana has the talent to stick with anybody in the Big Ten. It's just a matter of the effort and the coaching. And we've seen both of those things switch up late in the season. Um, I would not put a guaranteed loss on any team. Like people talk about Michigan State, like, oh, Indiana's gonna go play Michigan State in the quarterfinal round. They're gonna get trounced. Indiana beat Michigan State already in East Lansing. It's not to say that they'll do it again, but like Indiana's been competitive with every team that they've played in the Big Ten, except those early season blowouts to Iowa, Nebraska, and uh, Illinois. Iowa is was like the last team in the Big Ten tournament, I think. They did win today over Ohio State, which was very interesting. Jake Diebler's squad is on the downswing. And yeah, see ya. Um, and Nebraska didn't make the tournament. And then, of course, Illinois started out the year in the top 15, and they've kind of dealt with some injuries, and they're on the upswing a little bit as well. But I wouldn't count this Indiana team out against anybody.
Yeah, I mean, they got a chance, right? You played well against Michigan State. You competed against Oregon, a couple weeks ago, and you have momentum. You have a little bit of momentum. I don't know if I want to call it momentum, but you have, what do I call it? How do I put this? The good vibes. The good vibes that you've been able to flip around your season, right? When there was no hope, the only people that believed were the ones wearing the jersey, and you've been able to turn what could have been a very, very bad season into an okay season, right? I mean, still Woodson's going to be gone, but you turn things around and you turned it around in the right way.
The most dangerous team in this tournament is a team that has nothing to lose, and that's exactly where Indiana is. Nobody has anything to lose other than Woodson's ego, which I think has already been destroyed this year by the fans. That's it.
What's been destroyed more, your vocal cords or Woodson's ego? I
It's a
think you might have.
This is unbelievable, man.
I mean, to be fair though, Platt, how many games have you called in how many days? You were telling me this earlier.
7-6, and today will be 8-7, assuming I'm actually up for it and I'm not a, magical, Malik Renew in the ER for my voice, before Penn State kind of thing.
Exactly. So come on, guys, give Platt a little round of applause. He's bringing you all the details with IU softball and so forth. But
Oh yeah.
Nice little sippy tea
Um,
right there.
where were we? I completely lost my
yeah, I don't even know where we were. I got distracted by the voice crack. But Platt will well to continue Platt's point is, he was saying that teams, you know, hardest teams to beat are the ones that have nothing to play for. And Indiana doesn't necessarily have nothing to play for, right? You want to get out of Dayton. You don't
Nothing to
want
lose.
or nothing to lose. I'm sorry. Yes, correct. Sorry, I misworded that. But nothing to lose. Um, you know, Indiana was like that at one point, but now, they got stuff to play for. So, you kind of make a little push in the Big Ten tournament, right? And potentially sneak yourself out of Dayton. And again, Indiana, I think you said it earlier, Ian, it's just like the conversation nationally now for the Hoosiers, right? I mean, Woodson had that comment after the Ohio State game that what he said, like, is it maybe I'm leaving too soon, right? And that caused a lot of people nationally to talk about Woodson in this season. But if you keep, if you keep riding this wave and just enjoy it, don't think about it too much, right? You could, be on the positive side of things, depending who you play and where you end up at.
I think back to, I think this was after the Illinois game. Everybody was up in arms, and they got booed off the court at halftime. Luke Goody goes into the press conference. Everybody's trashing on him, and he goes, we'll turn this thing around. and nobody believed him. He was getting the Dan Dockich was going at him on Twitter. Nick Rodecap started making edits, and it was hilarious. Um, but no, Luke Whitty was right, and whoever didn't really stick with him then are now sticking with him. Uh, he's turned the fan, not him, but he has led part of the charge in turning the season around, getting the fan base back into things. Um, and there are a few things that make me happier than seeing players live up to their word of getting fan bases back involved, and also maybe Dan Dockich being wrong. And it was a good a good thing to bookmark on Twitter. Like you just had a feeling that something was going to change, and Goody believed that. Leal believed that. I think he said it as well in that same press conference. Galloway also. None of those guys were really producing at the way they are now. And it's been a great thing to see for them to actually turn it around to back up their word um, and let some other people swallow their words a little bit.
Yeah, you really, again, not to say that this team wasn't playing bad basketball at one point of the season, but you really have to tip your cap, right? Indiana earned the respect this season, right? This season could have been done a long time ago. The guys could have given up a long time ago. Woody could have given up a long time ago, right? He was already, he was already a foot out the door, right? Even before it was announced that he was going to step down. And so, but again, Indiana played with pride and, they're they're dancing, right? Who would have thought this team was going to go to the tournament, back after that Illinois game, after the UCLA game, right? Everybody was counting them out. And so, and I'll be the first one to say it, right? I didn't think this team was going to be able to turn it around like this, right? And a lot of people didn't. So, the guys that did believe were the ones in the locker room and, all but respect to them. You got to tip your hat sometimes.
I think back to when you say the word dancing, and the thing that most Indiana basketball fans are going to think about is that Media Day TikTok that Gabe Cupps and all of them
Oh, yeah.
made. And that's what people used to make fun of this team. And that was the meaning of dancing at that time when they were getting blown out. And then the videos started resurfacing on Twitter. I think Dan Dockich also was responsible for that. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, it's been a great turnaround. It's been a good thing to see that this team stuck around. And I'm honestly going to say, I think Mike Woodson stepping down is responsible, announcing he's stepping down is part of what is responsible for this turnaround. I think these guys wanted to, they needed something to light a little fire in them, and I think sending their coach out that they care so much about on the right foot um, is one of those things. And when you know that your coach is not coming back, when you know that this is his last season, you're going to want to play differently and act differently to make sure that the guy you respect so much is going to get what he deserves out of his last season. I think that's made a big impact. Also, I mean the I'm going to give credit to Woodson. He's the lineup changes.
Yeah.
Um, and the stubbornness has gone away in terms of his coaching styles and the too big lineup and everything. There have just been a whole slew of things that have changed, and sometimes change is hard to embrace, but when it is embraced, it usually works out.
Yeah, I mean, again, yeah, you said it really well there, and again, Indiana, just credit to them. They did it. Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
I think also Renew's injury, I think, changed a lot, a lot of things as well. I mean, you had to play one big. Like that was the biggest thing. And Balo earned his stripes. And once Renew came back, you played one big, and that had a lot to do with it as well. But like I think that's a huge piece like that. What winning streak. You go beat Penn State on the road, you take care of USC at home. Like there were some other things. It was like not having Renew was like you had to play one big and the style changed. And then obviously Woodson, that's the biggest reason why this team turned it around. But I also think like recognizing that the one big lineup freaking works, and they had to go with that. There was no way Woodson was going back.
Yeah, that Rutgers game really opened not only our eyes as fans, but it opened up Woodson's eyes and the coaching staff and really the team in general to the potential of like We talked Austin, we talked early in the season about the roster depth. We went down the whole roster. We were like, okay, they can start Rice and Galloway or even Carlisle at the time we said they can put Balo and Renew inside and have Ibaka with a shooting guard, and then they have this whole bench of like Galloway and Tucker and Goody and blah 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 blah. It's not how it works. And when Renew went out, they utilized the one big lineup. You were able to stagger the lineup with Renew and Rice coming off the bench. Because believe it or not, the bench drop off was there after we said it wouldn't be as much as last year. Um, but they were able to extend the lineup with Renew and Rice. They were, foul trouble wasn't as big of an issue because you're able to split minutes between guys. Like the only thing that's different about Renew in his new role versus his old role is getting announced in the starting lineups with a cool intro. Like he's playing the same amount of minutes, he's playing with the same guys, he's doing the same thing. He just doesn't get that fancy Jeremy Gray uh, call up there at Assembly Hall before the game. And a lot of people don't like, oh, you should be starting your best player. You start what works. And Indiana found what works. And as much as it's terrible to say that Renew injury really opened the door up for things, it's what happened and it's the truth.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that you guys bring up and a point I kind of forgot about, truthfully. It's like, yeah, it was I guess it was a little bit of you know, a blessing in disguise, right? Obviously Malik at the time was, or is Malik still the leading scorer? Well, regardless, he was the leading scorer at the time of his injury. And again, right, you're losing your leading scorer, you're losing a big presence down low in the front court, and it ended up working for Indiana. And again, Malik, I said it earlier, but Malik is playing still even after the injury because st Indiana announced the injury as they kind of minimized it a little bit, but it seems again we still don't have exact 100% confirmation of what exactly happened to Malik, I believe. But I mean, he's wearing a thick brace, right? And Malik was clearly in discomfort in his first couple games back, but credit to him for pushing forward. And again, I think you said it really well, Ian, earlier. It's like Indiana, change happens, right? It's how life works. And Indiana sort of embraced it, and look at them now.
Indiana's going dancing. It's just a matter of where, it's a matter of how soon they play, and it's a matter of what happens in the Big Ten tournament. But they're in the dance for sure. As we go back to the Big Ten tournament, I'm going to just give my quick prediction here. I'll say that Indiana beats Oregon and loses a close one to Michigan State, and I'm taking the Spartans to win it. I just think that they're the hottest team in the conference. I think that they'll have a good fight put up by somebody else in the bracket, but you know, I could see maybe a run from Maryland. Maybe they'll get upset. I don't know. The Big Ten is so wide open this year, but I'm taking the Spartans to win the tournament, the Big Ten tournament, that is. But Indiana, I think, will beat Oregon. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I think Indiana wins. I think they kind of win handedly against the Ducks. I expect a close game against Michigan State. I think the key in that game, it'll really show, how well can Indiana shoot the three, right? Michigan State's not the best three-point shooting by any means, right? Yet again, don't get me wrong, they're still very good, but haven't shot the ball well from deep. Um, I think right now I'll agree with you and say Michigan State wins it all, right? Again, the hottest team in the conference, and it's wide open this year. But I will say I like how Illinois has been playing as of late. I wouldn't be surprised by a slight push from Illinois. Ian, I actually said that in our class today, in
Yeah.
Jeremy Gray's class earlier this morning. But yeah, I could see a little bit of a push from Illinois. But again, I agree. Indiana wins against Oregon for their sake, fingers crossed, they win and get out of Dayton, but then, they'll lose a tough one, a close one against the Spartans.
I will pick Purdue to win this tournament, and that's not because
Out of nowhere.
I don't know who I trust in this tournament, guys. Like Izzo punts every single year with this. Like, does not care about this. Michigan's down. I like them at the beginning of the year. Their point guards aren't good enough. Maryland is like, I really like Maryland. They won at Michigan. I thought that was a big win. I don't know what the heck. Willard, that team hasn't had a ton of success. Wisconsin on my team, I'm a big fan of them. I love Tanjay. Should have been, arguably Big Ten Player of the Year, whatever. But they got to play that extra day. They're the 5 seed. Give me Matt Painter's guys. They lost last year's the 1 seed, lost to Wisconsin in the semis. They're down as of late. They are like under the radar. Like how the heck is Matt Painter's team right now? No one is talking about them. So I think they actually win this, and I'll say Indiana. They beat Oregon, and they lose to Michigan State. It's just like I could see anything happening. They could lose and get blown out, and I could see them like going in the Big Ten championship. Like it's all there for the taking. But I'll actually take Purdue to win this. I'm actually being serious. It can be a I don't know, a hate watch, but if I'm right, then I get to pat myself on the back.
Hey, it's a win,
I
man.
respect the choice. I can see it too, right? Nobody's really talking about this Purdue team right now, and I mentioned Illinois. Illinois got that win over them a couple games ago. But I agree, right? I could see it happening. It's wide open this year. It's the Big Ten. We expected, Indiana to run away with it, and look at how things kind of, turned out to be.
My voice is bad, but I could be Dylan Harper or Bailey, who just played their final game as Rutgers Scarlet Knights. They just lost in double overtime to USC. So life could be worse, but
Overtime.
they're going to the NBA and I'm not.
What an interesting squad Rutgers is. But Wisconsin is not getting talked about enough. They haven't gotten talked about enough all year long. And the Badgers are a team to watch out for. They'll probably be what a 4 seed in the tournament this year, um, maybe a 5.
Around.
No, they're a fun team to watch. They've got bigs that can shoot. Tanjay's great. They do this thing where they just go on spurts of just not missing a single shot. And no, it's pretty impressive to watch. The Big Ten tournament is always a fun watch. And we were stressing for a little while earlier this year that Indiana would even make it, but they're in. They're in pretty comfortably. And a good chance against Oregon coming up later tonight as you're listening to this. It should be wide open. March is always wide open. That's the beauty of it. One and dones from here on out, win or go home. And Indiana's got as good of a shot as anybody else. They've just got to treat every game like it's a tournament game because it is. It's either the Big Ten tournament or March Madness, assuming they don't somehow miss and accept an NIT bid or something like that, which is never going to happen.
Round
Um,
invite T. Let's go to Vegas, baby.
No, and it's going to be a fun watch. It's good to see that Indiana gets the opportunity to play some postseason basketball after a little bit of worry this year. But as we wind it down, Kevin, again, thanks for joining. I know this was a bucket list item for you.
Was. I can die a happy man now.
Kevin Vera from Inside the Hall, a vocal cord struggling Austin Platt as well for both of them. I mean Plaskoff. We'll see what Indiana is able to do tonight or today against Oregon, and we'll keep you updated as the postseason goes on. I've been Ian Plaskoff.